Hey guys, I do just want to say I really appreciate the support right off the bat. I met my goal of this year of getting 500 subscribers on YouTube from scratch, and I'm really excited to continue what we've been talking about for this past year on YouTube of education and some humor built in World of Warcraft. And I just want to take a step back here and own it, apologize for my mistakes over the past couple days. I fell into the rage bait myself, trying to be a little bit over the top, where there are many different ways to play this game. And at the end of the day, that's some of the magic of World of Warcraft. If I'm talking about a content creator, it's because I genuinely support them and think that they're good for the community. And it's just a little disappointing to me to see how that negativity transfers, and I was part of that. And for that reason, again, I do just want to publicly apologize to Grayson for that level of negativity. My goal has always been to help people get better, and the way I went about it wasn't the best. So that's really about it with that situation. There's plenty more to talk about in World of Warcraft. As you guys have shown to me, the streamer drama is just kind of like second tier to what I've always been talking about, which is the game. So I want to just get into that, right? Let's talk about the game today. And I guess, again, to look back here, it's fun to think about the past. I come from Whitemane is my original server. Before that, I did a little bit of private server, but nothing really before Whitemane. And the reason that I became a raid leader is because of GDKP. It was a little bit after BWL came out when GDKPs on Whitemane started to really pop up. It was more of a China meta before it was the overall meta. And that was my first experience going to some of these Chinese raids where it was just kind of a crapshoot if it would be a good raid or a bad raid, leaning more on the bad raid sometimes. And one time I didn't get a cut at the end of the raid because I focused on the mechanics rather than just the meters. And in some ways, maybe that's why I still get so triggered when people talk about logs in World of Warcraft and try and use that as an example to talk about being a good player. And it just shows how one dimensional some people's thinking is. But yeah, anyways, it's funny to look back and in 2021 talking on Era how I was like, yeah, I really don't think that there's ever going to be GDKPs coming into the game. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. 3 months later, we started. So GDKP Daily was born. Shout out to Iggy for getting that rolling. And at first, GDKPs on Era didn't really feel like they would ever happen because of the wealth disparity. There were a couple people that had thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of gold, and other people that didn't. So it just felt kind of useless. Gold didn't matter at the start of Era. All that mattered was resources. You had to actually farm and play the game. There were no bots. There was no one playing the game. It was a totally different experience compared to how it is now in every version of the game. And in some ways, I wish I could go back to that. But here we are. And yeah, just a couple screenshots, couple looking back moments on that time period. You don't get this in GDKP. Our guild was a soft reserve, or sorry, a DKP guild, um, and we did a couple like soft reserve pug kind of things, but primarily Phase 7 started as a DKP. And we'll talk about all those different loot systems and the pros and cons, but in a GDKP, you're just not going to get this level of tight knitness of people working for others for zero gain for themselves. That just doesn't exist in GDKP. So yeah, a couple different looks at DKP of what the top items were at this period of time. It's interesting to see what people care about, right? The Gressel, the Cots, but I'm getting distracted. Um, it's just funny to look back at some of these things and what pushed Era more to the mainstream of more people coming back was GDKP. People didn't want to come into the game, into a loot council, into a system where they were already behind. GDKP gives you that ability to be on a more even foot, have a more universal language, which is gold. So let's talk more about that universal language now. And just this final screenshot here as far as what I've done. I have done thousands of raids of GDKP. The gold inflation that's happened now compared to this is kind of crazy. How 100K, 170K for Gressel, the first one that came out, was just absolutely mind blowing. A 7K payout was like the biggest ever. And if you look at runs now, 7K is in some ways kind of standard a lot of the time. So just interesting to look back at some of these things. But let's get into the meat and potatoes now of this discussion. Why do people want to talk about GDKP? Well, I feel like people don't really understand it. So for us to be able to understand it, we have to talk about the meta and GDKP. It's funny to look at SOD of how much it failed. And I think no GDKP and SOD did have an aspect of that. If you look back at phase 1 of SOD where there were GDKPs, there's just more reasons to play, more incentive. The main word that I'm going to keep bringing up over and over is incentive. People need to have a reason to play. It's up to the game developers in some ways to decide what that reason to play is, and in some ways it's on the community and the players. But in SOD, that reason just fizzled out and died. And in MOP, I'm not sure why people play that game, but yeah. For me, in Classic, it's a mix of both the performance and just the community, right? Working together and building something I think is fun. So let's talk more about what World of Warcraft Classic is and the different stages of it. I called this first one here the foundation, the building stage of Molten Core. When the game starts, all you are doing is leveling and trying to build, right? You're getting that pre-raid BIS, you're starting to get alts, you're getting ready for the PvP. It doesn't take too much on your own. Well, sorry, I should take that back. It takes more on your own to get from 0 to something, from no 60s to 160. That's a process. And we can talk more about that whole leveling process, that experience later. But the end result is that, and this is wrong, by the way, I say DMT here. DMT is not expected. It's not out yet. What's expected is you're raiding about 2 hours a night with the homies and having a chill raid experience. Molten Core is never going to be super hard. Sure, people speedrun it and make it harder, but even then, the amount of complexity and tech in Molten Core is just pretty low. It's just kind of simplistic, right? And at its core, I think that's a big reason that people like Classic WoW, is that level of simplicity. And it starts to go away more and more as the game goes on. Once Dire Maul comes out, you have that second world buff. So you no longer have just the Ani head that you're getting. You have this expectation to get another buff in the higher level raids. Again, this is something that isn't required. People play the game all sorts of different ways, but the meta is to be efficient with your time. That's just how video games in this world work. As people grow up, they have less time available for video games, so they value what they're doing in that video game more, right? And for a lot of those people, they value getting the loot and having some level of accomplishment and completion. And in order to do that, you want to be at your best, right? Well, to be at your best, you go get these world buffs. As well as the buff of Dire Maul, there's just a lot more resources available. People are continuing to gather and just build their base. That's what it's all about. So as well as building, now comes in that first really big grind after you level, which is PvP. And I think Blizzard did a really, really bad thing with the PvP meta as far as everyone getting rank 14 and kind of what that did to the game. In some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. We can talk about the pros and cons of the PvP system later, but for now I'm just focusing on the different stages, which is the next one now, BWL and DMF. So another world buff comes out now, DMF. The big thing about the DMF buff is how you can only get it for 1 week out of the month. And that level of limitedness adds to how valuable world buffs are. You don't want to lose those world buffs. You want to maximize them and make them potentially last 2, 3 weeks kind of thing. And if you're able to do that, you're basically always able to raid with DMF at the start here of BWL. Kind of crazy. Again, this is I'm talking more in the speedrun mindset when it comes to that. Before boons, the expectation was never that you would have more than one DMF week. I think that is one potential kind of like side effect of the boons as far as more people get buffs. But anyways, people are finishing up their rank 14 going into BWL, and they're starting to think about that next phase, which is the gates opening. You have to farm a ton of resources for that. Reality is the common man is not farming the resources. It's guild leaders prepping, preparing, maybe assigning it out to the common man. But reality is it's a lot of organization and figuring out what's going to happen. And again, this is for that higher level of player that is trying to min max more. The guys that are just kind of going with the flow, they're not out farming those resources. They don't really care as much if they miss an AQ40 lockout. The expectation of how long you're raiding goes up a little bit now. Obviously, you went from 1 raid to 2 raids. Molten Core, maybe like an hour, hour and a half. If you're slow, 2 hours. It doubles, and the level of accountability and mechanics goes up a little bit in BWL. Not a ton, but it's just a little bit more, right? There's more potential for issues, and the more that you're doing things combined with the more potential for issues, the more valuable your time becomes. Usually people are still just raiding on one night a week, BWL and MC together. Some people doing, pugs, that kind of stuff. But again, with the way that Fresh is without pugs, it creates more of a rigid structure for these guilds that they have to stick with. Speaking of pugs, that's really what starts with phase 4 of ZG. ZG is a 20 man compared to a 40 man, so you don't always have your raid. Well, you'll never have your full raid, right? Because you can't fit them all. So because of that, you start splitting up more. Because it's on a 3-day cycle compared to a week cycle, you are just a little bit separate in this raid compared to the other ones. Obviously, some people, they only do guild runs, but reality is that ZG is kind of the perfect catch-up for the noobs, people that are coming in later to the game that maybe missed those resources phases, those building phases that we talked about. This is the time to catch up. And with that being said, there's obviously always more things that the top level players have to do to stay ahead. People in the back are trying to catch up, people in the front are trying to get ahead. So what that means is that they are continuing to prepare for the war effort. They're starting to work on their Earth Strike. They have their rank 14 done. They're working on more ults, maybe more ranking on ults kind of thing. And another world buff. The ZG world buff gives you a lot of utility. It gives you more damage, but the big thing is just having a higher health pool is big, as well as faster movement. ZG also unlocks the Zanzas, which again is the same thing, right? Higher health or more speed. It's just a utility thing that allows these guys that are speedrunning the game to push it to that next level. And combined with this, like I said, people have their rank 14 gear now. They vastly outscale this level of content. The rank 14 gear is really basically on par with AQ40 gear. So in this version of the game, everyone got AQ40 gear before AQ40 came out in these sweaty groups. Again, I'm understanding that not everyone does rank 14, but I know people that did multiple. Okay, it's just one of those things, right? So now we are really into what I call the pressure phase, theme, where it starts to be a lot. And in 2020, this is what broke me. I didn't think I would ever do AQ40. It was something that was just too daunting for me. I did some raid leading of BWLs, and it was just like, I can't. So fortunately, I have a lot of people that help me out with my raids, and I could shout out like 5-10 people right now during this time period of me learning AQ40. But the reality is that it's a team effort, right? This is where you really start relying on others as well as expecting people to be good on their own. AQ40 has a lot of individual mechanics that require accountability. And for those that don't have that knowledge or that ability related to that, they're going to start really struggling here. This is when people start also losing interest in the lower tier raids if they've been around this whole time. So for those that are that higher level that know what's up, those healers, they probably don't need anything from Molten Core anymore, right? They just don't have that same incentive, that desire to go to these raids just to clear them, to spend their time doing those things when there's so many other things that they could be doing. BWO and MC do have some BIS loot, and I think that's a little bit misunderstood as far as why I love vanilla, because even though these later phases come out, there are still reasons to go back. You have to get that Thunder Fury, you have to get that OSG, right? Akuria, I could go on and on. There are good things in all of these raids that bring people back, as well as the desire then to catch up those people that don't have this level of gear yet. It's a great time for alts, people that have leveled multiple accounts now, to start getting that gear from ZG, AQ20, Molten Core, right? But you're now going to really have multiple raid days to get through this all. AQ40 likely to take you about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours in a lower tier raid. I understand the fastest raids, they do it in like 30 minutes. But even then, like they're doing prep and stuff, and it's like an hour minimum, right? You're gonna spend time in each of these raids. And having 2 raid days compared to one, that's double, right? Like that's significant. So there's more things to do and less reasons to do them for some people. So now we're into phase 6. This is where we are right now. The true end game. Everything is available now that we've finished the Scourge invasion. I forgot to mention the farm of the Earth Strike in the previous phase. That's kind of like one of the last big farms that you're going to be doing as a warrior. After that, you're just kind of thinking about stones, and then it's over. Nax is by far the hardest when it comes to progression. It's where people are going to most likely struggle. It's where you get exposed with your level of prep and knowledge. That's what a lot of this game is, much more so than other versions of World of Warcraft, is the level of prep and the level of knowledge. Those two things. And for some people, that's not super engaging or enjoyable. So they're already thinking about the next, right? TBC waiting room. That starts to immediately being the thought process for a lot of people. And if that's the case, they have even less reason to go back to those lower rates. So now you don't just have Molten Core, you don't just have BWL, you don't just have AQ40 or ZG or AQ20. You also have the hardest raid. And there's something that is pulling you to do all of those. It's a true grind, and I just respect those that are able to stay consistent with it. Feel free to make fun of me for saying that. Um, but reality is, the world that we live in values dedication. You look at the best athletes, you look at the best business people. The people that spend the time in their craft become the best, and that's cool. So for those that choose to do that in classic World of Warcraft, for me, I respect that. It's up to you if you do or not, but they're gamers. There's a lot of people that have deep understanding of this game, much more than me. I put myself at like a solid B when it comes to ability. A little bit more on the, I'd say I have a good bit of knowledge, a solid A on knowledge. But anyways, let's now talk about the loot systems. I don't think GDKP is perfect. I think that gold buying and selling ruins the integrity of the game. It makes you question what's the point. Anytime that you are starting to question what's the point, you start to get burnt out. So we'll just move this as far as the cons. I'm hiding the cons. So DKP, that's what I talked about, was phase 7 at the start. It was the best when it came to attendance. Everyone showed up because their DKP would decay. So this feeling of working towards something could be removed from you if you didn't show up, which created a very stable environment of the same people being there week after week. And it was great. It was really fun. The problem was that I couldn't miss. I really wanted to get that THC. So I didn't miss a raid for like 40 weeks. And it just grinded me down and made me frustrated that this one thing was out of my reach. And admittedly, that's like the one time I really started to focus on loot. And I think a lot of times when people start focusing on loot, they will lose the main focus, which is like I talked about getting better, helping others, that kind of stuff. You play the game for how you want, but I can just tell you when I'm loot hungry, it's in the end, it just kind of feels more hollow. Once you get that item, it's like, okay, what's next? Anyways, I run a lot of SRs. So, and it's kind of a sometimes a hybrid where there's loot canceled item as well. So, soft reserve with extra steps, as we would like to call. They're simple. They don't take much to explain to other people because everyone should know how soft reserves work. The problem is that the people that are putting in the most work often get the least out of it, especially in lower tier SRs. In runs that are not very consistent, the couple people that are just eventually become not because it's not fun. You have 20 people that are doing nothing getting carried by the couple people that are. And then seeing those people continue to get rewarded for doing nothing makes those people that are doing more do less. And in the end, it just becomes more and more time waste, less and less efficient, and it's a struggle. So that's something that can be often take away in a loot council where the people that are putting in the most work, they would get rewarded, right? You have a group of people that decides who gets the items. Obviously, that is very polarizing. If you don't agree with the loot council, then you're not going to have a good time. The key to a loot council is, do you like the loot council? It's that simple, right? If you like it, you're going to love it. If you hate it, you're really going to hate it. It does take a while to more effort. The nice thing about soft reserves is it's off your plate as a raid organizer. It just happens. Whereas with loot council, you have to manage expectations and it's just more, right? So finally, but not least here, GDKP. I see it as the best of both worlds in a lot of these cases of the other systems where it's kind of like universal DKP, right? Like everyone has that same currency that they can spend how they want. Like I said, it is obviously pay to win. And on Whitemane at the start, when those people had hundreds of thousands of gold compared to the 99% that had nothing, it just doesn't feel that great. It feels like you don't stand a chance to ever get anything. But what I can tell you, as someone that's run GDKPs for years within a more closed loop, that kind of changes. There's two different kinds of GDKPs, I would say, the greedy ones and the non-greedy ones. If you have a large host cut and are constantly popping, pushing up the pot, to me, that's a little bit immoral, maybe, just because you're taking advantage of the people that you're bringing with you. At the same time, a lot of raiders want the pots to be bigger because those people that are putting in the most effort, they want to get rewarded, right? They want to get something out of it. So the more that people are spending, the more that they get. The cool thing about GDKP is that once you get your gear, you still have something more that you can get. That's to me the whole problem with the soft reserve system and DKP in these runs that are, phase 6 and you're trying to do molten core. There's just not much. It's hard to get people to go to those raids. And again, there's that camaraderie, that feeling of a guild that should be there, that should make it so that you don't struggle. But the reality is that people are people and people need incentives. Really that simple. And I just thought this was kind of an interesting comment here that was on a Zaryu video talking about Classic Plus as far as this mindset of a game being horizontal or vertical. And the problem with Classic is that it's vertical, where you're working your way up through the phases. However, I feel like everything that we've just talked about proves how horizontal it is, right? That there are reasons to go back. And by having GDKP, it really creates that horizontal gameplay of always having a reason to go back and doing those lower tier raids, because you know you're going to get rewarded. Those couple people that maybe really want that stuff are willing to pay for it, and you're going to go get paid. So let's just look at a couple examples of um, what I would say is a real life example that just kind of cracks me up. So I don't know if this audio is going to be
EFT.
rough.
Good luck, everyone.
Greek Wario, really like his streaming. So he did a soft reserve pug on, I see Descendants of Hope, see Dragon Snacks. It's hard to tell at this point how much stuff. Oh, okay, never mind. Because I see this buff, I know it's fresh. So he's on fresh right now, and he does a run where Drake Fang Talisman is going out, and a rogue won it. So he's now looking at the meters here and is like, dude, you do not deserve this. I said it at the start. If you're going to reserve BIS stuff and suck, you're not going to get it, which is what happens to this guy. So let's look here. I'm that guy, TTV. He does nothing. He doesn't unboon. He barely presses his buttons and is just a total sandbag in this raid. Like, was he there? Yeah, but didn't do a whole ton. And he's got pretty good gear already. So probably has a habit of doing this. Compared to, look at some of like the top rogues in that group comparison, always using T's, has Earthstrike farmed, just a lot more different stuff, right? Better awareness, everything. And those are the kind of players that should get rewarded. So props to Greek for having a backbone and not giving it to that guy. But at the same time, this is the problem, right? This is why SRs are rough. So since then, Greek has now been more focused on his era gameplay of GDKPs. They had a really rough Cthulhu here. They managed, I think they killed it. Yeah, they just had a bunch of deaths, but they ended up killing it, so props to them. But he didn't pay this guy. Let's see, again, I want to be a little...
They get another port. A rail will get a port going.
Once. At the
First overall fucking damage, like in a fucking 1033, a 1032 gear score with a fucking low activity time. No.
So, yeah, he just denied this guy from getting paid, and nope, he did not get paid. And there's another case of that too here.
Harry and Pippin, you played like shit. And you didn't bid on anything. Cool. Harry, you did 0 sunders, and also you did not bid on any of your upgrades.
So I see both sides of this from a perspective of being in the raid. It would be very frustrating if I just put in all this effort and wasn't rewarded for it. And I think that often is the people that get most frustrated about GDKP, is those lower tier players that might be afraid that they wouldn't get paid at the end, or they're not going to get that benefit in GDKPs. Compared to in soft reserve, they can just do whatever the heck they want, and as long as the guild leader is a little bit nicer than Greek, they're probably going to get away with it. It sucks to put in effort and get nothing out of it, and doing that over long periods of time breaks people. So I get it. And I think that's kind of the end result here, is that the people that are putting in that effort are tired. I feel like that there has never been a worse pug scene than what Fresh is dealing with. There's no pug AQ40s. Back on Whitemane, there would be pug AQ40s literally every hour, because there would be incentives to host them from a GDKP perspective, incentive from an alt if you want to get the gear on an alt, if you want to go carry on a main. It's just a total different infrastructure. I kind of feel like I'm not going to do as good job of explaining it. Is you just really have to live it, is all I can say. Once you have that community of GDKP in a positive sense, again, want to mention there can be more of a greedy side of runs that really push up the pots. But if you have a more internal group where it's 40 people and it's people that you generally enjoy playing with, you trust, it's just fun. It's a reason to keep playing the game. You know you're always going to get something out of it, which just doesn't exist in other versions of loot systems. So, had to talk about it more. Anyways, GG's.